Hi, my name is Adele Purdham, and I am a writer, teacher, speaker, and parent disability advocate. I am absolutely thrilled to be speaking to you at the World Down Syndrome Congress in Dubai, and I'm coming to you from Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. I'd also like to thank the Emirate Down Syndrome Association for organizing this year's conference, and I'm greatly indebted to all the volunteers involved in organizing the conference, as well as DSI, Down Syndrome International. Thank you so much. So, a world of possibilities. I came up with the name for this talk after my family had went literally on an around the world trip. So, how did I get from a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome with my daughter, Elise, who is now 9 years old, to our family literally traveling around the world. And of course, that trip took place right before COVID. So let's sort of go through. Oops. Okay. I do first want to acknowledge, because it's important to my story, that I was very privileged to be able to attend several World Down Syndrome Congresses in the past. The first was in 2014, when Elise was just 2 years old. She didn't go with me, but I was very lucky to be able to travel to India. You see up here in the top corner, the Taj Mahal, and in Delhi, where I stopped before the conference in Chennai. And then I was also able in 2018 to head to Scotland for the World Down Syndrome Congress there. And I think what's really stood out for me in being an attendee at the conference, not only the incredible research coming from scientists and medical professionals and the cutting edge of on the frontier of what's going on in the Down syndrome world, and really learning from experts in the field across the world. But I learned so much from listening to people with Down syndrome themselves, self-advocates. And I also learned greatly just from hearing from parents and really trying to understand what is the context in the country, what is the socio-political climate for people with Down syndrome in different countries. And just listening to the parents, I realized it varies greatly. And so what I hope to offer you today is sort of one snapshot from one family's experience to sort of give an idea of not necessarily the kind of life that's possible for a person with Down syndrome, but maybe the kind of life that a family could lead, and what that experience could be like for a person in Canada. And hello to all my past World Down Syndrome Congress friends. I hope you get a chance to listen to this. So to understand, to know where we're going, we need to understand where we've been. So the first picture here is me when I was pregnant with Elise, and I had just had my first daughter, Ariel. Ariel was just about 18 months old when Elise was born. And everything about Ariel's pregnancy was typical, easy labor, no complications. And I had been 27 years old when I had Ariel, and I was 28 when I had Elise. And so I had no reason to think that my next pregnancy after Ariel would be different. And so when I found out prenatally that Elise would be born with Down syndrome, it wasn't something I was expecting. And to be honest, I hadn't really considered disability up until that point in my life. And if I had, it was in a really superficial way, and in a way that it didn't impact me. And I guess the belief that I held and the story that I told myself was that it was okay for people to have Down syndrome, but not for me. You know, it was okay for someone else to have a child with Down syndrome, but not me, not my family. You know, I sort of rode this high horse of that's fine for someone else, but not what I want in my life, or so I thought. And really, truthfully, I did grieve this sort of expectation of this is going to be, you know, of what I thought would be, this would be a normal, a quote unquote normal life, you know, having a child, a typical child. And there was a grieving period for me, and there was a coming to understand, well, what does having a child with Down syndrome mean? And what does it mean for my family? And, you know, for me as her mother. But I think where our story took a turn is when when you find out in Canada that your child is going to be born with Down syndrome. We did have some wonderful supports available to us. I was able to talk to a social worker. They then followed my pregnancy closely. And then it was through following my pregnancy closely that I found out, or we found out, that our daughter would be born with duodenal atresia, which is a blockage in the duodenum. And once Elise's life was in jeopardy, nothing else really seemed to matter. You know, Down syndrome no longer seemed to matter, that she should live, that she should get to have a story to tell and a life to live was all that really then mattered to us. And so she was in the hospital for 4.5 weeks after she was born. She was in the neonatal intensive care unit. And yeah, this is a picture of her, me holding her in the middle here, and when she was starting to get a little bit better and have some color, and she was able to learn to breastfeed, and really truly, after having surgery at a day old, made a remarkable recovery. And then here you have her on the right when I think she was almost about a year old. And yeah, I think after that surgery, there was sort of no looking back. It was, all right, let's move forward with life together. Let's see, you know, what can she do? What will she be able to do in her life? You know, she's here. Let's just see. So again, what are the stories we tell ourselves about our loved ones with Down syndrome? If we want to have a world of possibilities to get to that place, first we need to set our expectations high. So let me give you an example sort of in my life, and just to give you the context too of the Canadian education system. So my thought, my goal, my desire for my children was, I had gone through the French immersion program. So sorry, just to back it up a minute, in Canada, when you go to school, you have a public school option. And through public school, you can learn in English, and every child in Canada through the English stream will receive some level of instruction in French through Core French. Or you could choose to do a French immersion program where you will receive, generally, it's a 50-50 split between English and French in the earlier years. Or you could choose to do a more intensive, even language program, which would be a French first language school, where generally you have the dominant language being spoken in society is English, in Ontario, where I live, but you're able to go into an immersive French only program where you would eventually, almost like the inverse of the public school English program, where you receive some French, eventually in the French first language program, you would receive a little bit of English eventually, with the goal of being completely bilingual. So for several years before I had my daughters, and I now have 3 girls, Ariel, who's 10, Elise, who's now 9. And then I've since had a third daughter as well, Penelope. And my thought and my wish for all of my children was that they would be able to go to a French immersion program, because that's what I went through. And learning a second language, I think not only is it incredible when you travel and meet people, you're able to speak in their language, but I was able to get a job in terms of what it does in your brain. There's some really interesting cognitive benefits pertaining to the brain's elasticity and building new neural pathways and potentially even staving off Alzheimer's, some really interesting connections there with second language learning. And I thought, why? Of course, I would want my children to have that. I'm able to support them. I was a French immersion teacher. And I used to teach grade 1 French immersion. And I would tell my parents that were really concerned because they'd come in with their 6-year-old child. And these are just typical children. And the parents would say to me, oh, I don't know. I don't speak any French. I'm worried about how are they going to do? And I would say, don't worry. Before I had children, don't worry. A French language program is for everyone, except for potentially if your child has a language delay. And that was the story I was telling myself as a teacher, and I thought I was doing a great job. And then my daughter was born with Down syndrome. And I knew that what came along with that was that she would have a language delay. And suddenly that story just couldn't hold for me anymore, because that wasn't good enough. That's not what I wanted for her. And so I had to sort of tell myself a different story. Well, what about if we tried? What about if I supported her? What about if, why couldn't she learn French? Let's see what happens. And so I went to our local French immersion school at the time. And I said, what supports would be available for a child with Down syndrome? And they said, ooh, that's a really good question. And so I knew pretty much right away that they hadn't had a child with Down syndrome in that school for a while, and that perhaps that would not be a place where my daughter would be set up to succeed. We'd have to sort of pave the way. So I went to our local, and that was the French immersion program. Remember 50-50. So then I went to, and we're very lucky we have options. So then I went to the local French first language school. And I said, what supports would be available? And they said, your daughter will receive 100% support, which means that she has a person, an educational assistant, who will work with her throughout the day, whatever level of support she needs to ensure she's safe. In the beginning, when she was 3 years old, to ensure she's toileted, and gets help with that, and basically everything she needs. And then we were in a position to be able to tell a different story. And we were in a position to be able to set the expectations high. And we were in a position to start dreaming about what her life could be. And so we did sign her up for French first language school. Elise is fully fluent in understanding French. She has some, to this day, she's now in grade 4 and continuing in the French program. And it's been an incredible experience. Her verbal expression in the language is coming along really nicely. And I'd say she faces the same challenges that she would face in English instruction, but she's just learning to think and express herself in French. And it's been incredible, because then when I had my big idea, so this happens to me sometimes, I get very big ideas. And my very big idea was, what if we sold our house and just traveled the world? And so sometimes when I say I have a big idea, my husband said, just a minute, and he'll go and get himself a drink or whatever is needed. This time he said, yeah, we could do that. And I was literally pregnant. I was pregnant with our third child. And yeah, and I think for me, I've always wanted to travel. I love traveling. And I really wanted to push back against this idea that when you're a family who has a child with Down syndrome, that there's things that you should miss out on. I really reject that idea. I think that's preposterous. So I thought, I want to travel. Let's do it. What's holding us back? Nothing. So we did do it. Oops, sorry, keep an eye on the time. Yeah, it took 3 years to plan, and we did. We traveled literally around the world. Here's some highlights, and we'll just sort of go through. I just want to show you some of the things that Elise was able to do. It was pretty neat. We visited Alcatraz and San Francisco, California. That's where we started our trip. Put Elise and all of our children in jail. And then we went to Hawaii. And Elise, who was 7 years old at the time, I think this was a really amazing moment for our family. We all went surfing, even though it was really scary and we were in the water with sea turtles and the surf was rough. We all got out there and we pushed ourselves and we did something that maybe we didn't think that we'd ever be able to do. Especially when you're a family who has a child with Down syndrome. I think there's a perception, and I really do think that there are certain things that we can't do or shouldn't do. So I really want to challenge that notion. Here's some awesome more pictures in Hawaii. We stared into the mouth of a volcano. We looked down, swam at the bottom of waterfalls. Then we made our way to Japan. And I'm not gonna say, Elise, that this was super easy for our family to do. Elise wore diapers at night. We did buy diapers in Japan, I remember. Penelope also wore diapers still. And the food was a challenge. Elise likes what she likes, like all kids. And so I think she ate a lot of rice and fried chicken when we were in Japan. But really incredible experience. Then we moved to Thailand. And this is a viper in the bottom of the screen. So sort of these elements of danger that made their way through our adventures. But we saw monkeys high up in the trees and we hiked through a jungle. And then we made our way to Chiang Mai for the Lantern Festival and got to really experience, this rich cultural experiences as a family. And celebrating good things to come for the new year with Loy Krathong. We saw elephants, we fed them, we touched them. That was also scary, but wonderful. Here's Elise reading some books by the beach in Thailand. In total, I think we were on 11 different flights. Here was a quick stop in Frankfurt, Germany. And then we ended in Portugal, back in Europe. Here, the girls are at the zoo. And these were some pictures that Elise took. She became our sort of unofficial photographer on our trip. Yeah, and here's one of our photos in Hawaii. So I think I want to share this with you just to sort of give you this taste. I know it's been COVID, very difficult to travel. But for me, whatever your version of an around the world trip is, I hope that you will see that possibility for you and your family. I hope that you won't let anything within your society, what other people think, what maybe the stories that you're telling yourself about what you can do or can't do. I think it is possible to change those stories. It is possible to believe in what people with Down syndrome are capable of. And with the right supports and obviously the resources, bringing other people in to sort of support you, these things are possible. And I really hope that you'll dream big, and I hope that you will take the time to tell me about it sometime. My name again is Adelle Purdham, and you can reach me through my website. I am so grateful. I'll stop sharing this. I am so grateful to Down Syndrome International for having me as a speaker this year in Dubai, and to everyone involved with the conference, as well as the Emirates Down Syndrome Association. That's all for now. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.